This is the broadcast of Back Roads of Illinois. We are bringing latest agricultural news and markets update on Back Roads of Illinois. Bring you like inside of the markets and interview with people in the agricultural industry for farmers and ranchers in central Illinois and across the Midwest. Today's edition of Back Roads of Illinois. We were Central Illinois agriculture source, and in the Midwest alongside in Central Illinois agriculture, we were glad you're here on a Thursday. I'm Cesar Delgado. We were talking about the farm economy and ethanol industry for this moment because the farmers is concerned about their responses from the campaign trail to the commodities markets. We were talking about it with Mac Marshall. We were talking about the commodities markets with Garrett from Ag Trader in DeKalb County and John Heinberg from Total Farm Marketing. This is your agricultural news and markets update on Back Roads of Illinois. We are watching the hurricane in the Gulf Coast, but it has been potentially get Category 5 in Florida. Hurricane Helene in Big Bend, Tallahassee, Tampa Bay area. We will keep our eyes on it for tomorrow in the Midwest. The traders are looking forward for the acreage report on Monday morning at 11. I talked to Arlen Suderman from StoneX chief economist. We do not expect that the numbers are not changed from June acreage report. Finally, this will be big crop in central Illinois. Otherwise, this week of some rain in central Illinois near Peoria between Springfield from the Hurricane Helene and the Gulf Coast for this week. We were coming back with our guest with Mac Marshall from Balcony Consulting Services. Stay tuned on Back Roads of Illinois. We were talking about the farm economy and ethanol industry for this moment because the farmers is concerned about their responses from the campaign trail to the commodities markets. We were talking about it with Mac Marshall. How are you today, Mac?
I'm doing great, Cesar. It's great to see you again, man, and great to catch up. Lot to catch up on. Certainly as we're talking farm markets, and unfortunately, the last time we talked, farm economy, I think was in a much different position. Although we were probably, already starting to head towards, where we are now in a bit of a commodity price downturn. Some burdensome supplies here in the United States was not coming at a great time because that means farmers are having to sell at discounted values to make way for the next harvest, which for corn and beans both looking very, very large. Potential record bean crop, 4.6 billion bushels. But farmers are resilient. You have to be every single year to navigate commodity price fluctuations, weather, everything that goes up and down. And there's plenty of other challenges. You mentioned campaign trail. Certainly, the outcome of the upcoming presidential election is, and of course, the down ballot stuff matters too. But that'll have potentially material, outcome on the trajectory of the U.S. ag economy for the coming years. So, lots to follow. Definitely some interesting policy things moving along. I've been working a lot in the biofuel space over the last couple months as an independent consultant, and looking ahead towards next year. Some potential policy things that can either be beneficial for additional inclusion of farmers in the energy economy, or some things that could potentially be misguided and miss out on a good opportunity for leveraging what we do best in this country, which is grow crops and grow crops in abundance that have many diversified applications. And the energy space, you mentioned ethanol, but also biomass-based diesel fuel. Love that we can leverage corn and soy and canola and even some of these, smaller emerging, winter oil seeds for advancing our energy diversification, our economy here. But policy setup has to be right. We don't need, you know, we don't need additional stringency that could potentially preclude farmers from participating in these markets.
Let's start with our conversation about updating the ethanol industry from 45Z models with a substantial full aviation from the Treasury Department. What is your takes on it?
Yeah, this is really the big thing, and I've been really approaching 45Z, a little bit more. And it's funny, my consultancy is Balcony View Consulting, and so I definitely love your background there. I like Balcony View because it's perspective of getting to see a whole bunch of things happen at once. And you've got the football field in the background. You can kind of get the all 22 film there, so to speak. See every part of the field all
Joe
clearly.
Biden put tariffs to China. However, Trump grows a tariff from China by next year. But how is the policy from Harris?
Well, the trade environment here, I think some of the concerns that farmers are going to have is there undue regulation. And when you talk about like a state like California, certainly there's stringency with Prop 12 and there's stringency. We already talked about it. I think with the low carbon fuel standard. And Harris obviously from California originally, so I think there's some concerns around farmers of what that's going to be. It's a lot of the back and forth, I'd say between Republicans and Democrats as it comes to the farm bill is, are we talking producer assistance or are we talking supplemental nutritional, assistance programs on the Democrat side? So I think it's even as there's consternation in terms of, whether it's Harris, Trump, or, whatever the, future political regime is, I think it's good that food and ag touching, consumers, obviously on SNAP side, touching producers, on farm assistance side is there too. You put all that together, it's great that food and ag continue to be in the dialogue, and I'd like to see more of that. As far as pursuit of trade and everything, we'll see what the agendas look like. The present, the regime right now, I'd say a lot of the consternation the farmers have had is that there hasn't been pursuit of new trade deals. Ideally, in whatever future regime we have, there's a greater emphasis on additional foreign market collaboration and the ability to grow markets for U.S. ag, not just to the benefit of American producers, as obviously there's economic viability there, but for the benefit of other countries around there that operate in deficit and really need American production to help enable food security and by extension economic security. So fingers crossed that whoever is president on January 20th, 2025 comes in and recognizes the importance of continuing to secure and stabilize markets for American farmers, both domestically and abroad.
Do you have any final thoughts or recap?
Well, it's another great interview to catch up on with you, Cesar. You continue to just blow my mind with how young you are and how how you're able to just understand these policy minutia, be it 45Z, and if nothing else, this world of ag is so dynamic. It is perpetually changing. Several years ago, we never would have thought of, Inflation Reduction Act back in 2020 or 2021 and the implications that it has for sustainable aviation fuel, for participation of farmers in the energy transition. But here we are. Now it's the stuff that takes up a lot of headlines, I think justifiably so. And hopefully, as we move into 2025, we see a turnaround in price movement. We'll see what happens with the South American crops as planting starts in the next couple weeks. Brazil certainly for soy, and we'll see what happens with commodity markets in that coming time. And hopefully, once we get to 2025, farmers are, if not already on better footing, but on the trajectory for it. It's too important. Getting some relief on the on interest rates as some of the macroeconomic figures come in, and we saw the rate cut by the Fed last week. More of that would be beneficial for highly leveraged industry that relies a lot on financing, such as farming. So lots to come in the year ahead. But in the meantime, man, it's great to catch up. Thank you always for the opportunity to come on. And I know your Niners are kind of catching the injury bug here. So selfishly, as a Seahawks fan, I hope that continues.
Yes, I do really appreciate your work. Thanks, Mac.
Thank you very much, Cesar. Always a pleasure. Let's do this again soon. Let's do it at Farm Progress next year, too.
This is Mac Marshall from Balcony Consulting Services on back roads of Illinois.
Thanks again, Cesar.
Open bell numbers of the commodity markets from morning open session. Corn futures are up at 5 to 10 cents at the half. Soybean futures finished in up 8 to 9 cents. Wheat futures finished in up 7 to 8 cents at the quarter. This is your Livestock Markets Update sponsored by Kyle Bumstead from Allendale Incorporated. Cattle futures finished in up 4 to 6 cents. Feeder cattle finished in up 3 to 6 cents. Lean hogs finished in down 2 to 4 cents. Crude oil finished in down 3 to 4 cents per barrel. Dow Jones finished in down. Thanks to Mac Marshall from Balcony Consulting. Now that we were going to talk about on the markets with Garrett Toay from Ag Trader, talking north to me in Warren, Illinois. How are you been?
Great, Caesar. We're starting to get into fall harvest. It's early up here. Still waiting on corn to dry down, and beans are ready, but they're a little too dry. But looks just the nature of the beast. I think the way this harvest is going to go.
Let's start with our conversation about updating on the harvest season in northern Illinois. Could you tell our audience about this harvest season?
Sure, absolutely. It's been one of those years. We started off with a wet spring. A lot of our corn crops were planted within a week's time. So obviously the maturity dates helped us spread that crop out, but the majority of the corn crop was planted in a week's time. Pollination had no problems. It was a relatively wet year throughout. We had moisture whenever we needed it. And then, like a lot of the Corn Belt, the last 6 weeks, well, now it's the end of September, the way the month has flown by, the last 8 weeks have been relatively dry. Some of the lighter soils I noticed last week with the heat, some of the lighter soils have corn has kind of given up and just died. There's some late planted corn that's still relatively green. I have customers that are shelling wet corn for cattle. End of last week, that stuff was running 35% moisture, which is right where they want it to be. Early bean harvest, obviously early bean harvest is important. I think the best yields or opportunity is in early beans, but they've been running, mid 60s to mid 70s, which is good, for up in this neck of the woods. We're a reference point. We're My office is about a mile from the Wisconsin border, and we are about 45 minutes east of Dubuque, Iowa, on the on the Iowa border. So we are up here as far north Illinois as you can get. But beans have been in the um, 65 to 75 range, which are pretty good. The biggest issue has been moisture. I've heard beans as dry as 9%. I've heard beans as low as 7%. Um, and that's obviously robbing some yield potential. Beans could have been a lot better if the moisture was better. In fact, I had a friend who told me that we had a shower go through Saturday night, and they were looking. Usually, knocks us off for a couple of days, but they were cutting beans the next day just because they needed the moisture.
How is the corn yields as far as Illinois and Iowa border?
Everything I've seen has been the early yields have been exceptional. We kind of aggregate a national network of private yield network, if you will, and the running it's not scientific by any means, but the running average on yields has been about 15% above last year, which would tell us that yields would support the USDA's ideas.
Garrett, what is your takes on the acreage report?
It'll be interesting because this year's different than prior years because the USDA has implemented the FSA acres into earlier reports. I was a bit surprised that we actually did see some adjustments in September. I guess I was a bit off taken that we didn't see as much prevented plant out of those northern areas that were wet. This out of the August report, if you will. But at this point in the game, historically speaking, deviations are usually tough to come by after we get those initial FSA data dumps. That's the one thing that really could turn this market around.
How is the supply and demand? Demand is pretty tight for right now with tariffs.
Well, yeah, the tariffs have still been in place, and I saw a comment today that it's right. Is that that the tariffs, even though we had the change in the administration from President Trump to President Biden, the tariffs were never removed. It's just whether they enforced them or not. But the comment that I read today is that it's kind of funny, and it's absolutely true. Is that once the government decides that they can do something to make money, they tend to keep doing it. So the tariffs will probably still be in place at some point. From an economic standpoint, U.S. beans are still competitive. It still comes down to S&Ds, and U.S. is the market between now and February or March, maybe March, depending on how late this Brazilian bean crop gets planted. I think the market, because we're in the midst of harvest and the yields are still good, we're still focused on supply. We're 80 cents off of our lows, so we've already had a decent little rally in here. We get through these harvest lows some point, in the next 2 to 3 weeks and see where demand looks from there. But this year does look to be a supply issue, especially if drought is going to be a concern in Brazil.
Do you have any final thoughts or recap?
Yeah, I mean, this is it's been an interesting fall so far. I will say is that I think a lot of people may have caught leaning in here, not really expecting this kind of rally through the early parts of harvest. So perhaps it may have caught some people off guard. I still don't necessarily trust it until we get through at least the 50% harvested mark. I just think the farmer can still be relatively engaged in here at some point. Yeah, I think that there's some opportunities here, especially with $11 beans, or even we hit 10.50 on Nova beans, or the front end traded to almost a 4.20 on D's corn. That if you're going to be short on space, harvest that gave those producers an opportunity to sell something that they were planning to sell out of the field at much better values than what we were, say, 3 weeks ago. So at least that's one bright spot in markets that are relatively depressed. But I still think that 450 to 475, given the S&Ds, is probably the upper end of this market in December corn. Nova beans, that's Nova beans, or excuse me, not just Nova beans, but beans in general. Uh, considering the short covering in beans has been um, rather subdued rather compared to corn. Beans could run a little bit, get into 11s a little bit, but as far as beans in the teens, that would probably surprise me this year. It all depends on Brazilian weather.
Where people can find you for your consulting services.
Yeah, they can look us up online at www.agtradertalk.com, or shoot me an email at Garrett, 2 R's, 2 T's, at agtradertalk.com.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks again, Caesar, for having me. It's always a pleasure.
This is Garrett toay from Ag Trader Talk on Back Roads of Illinois. We were going to talk on the markets with John Heinberg from Total Farm Marketing for today's program on Back Roads of Illinois. How are you today? I'm hoping that the Bears is bound back to the Rams in Los Angeles.
So I'm doing well today, doing well. Beautiful weather here in Wisconsin. I love fall weather. I wish I could get outside and enjoy it a little more. But yeah, but with that, maybe switch your allegiance to the Illini. They're playing pretty good ball. Of course, takes the next Badger coach, to get that going. Anyway, with that, let's get rolling on these markets, Caesar.
Yes, sir. How are things in the corn complex for the close?
Pretty disappointing close again today, or today in general. Now let's get some big picture here first, and then I'll kind of narrow in on what happened today. Realistically, if you look at the commodity markets in general since the early part of September, probably tied to the prospects of the rate cuts from the interest rates, freeing up the money supply. It's an inflationary move. We've seen some pretty good money flow into commodities, not just the grains. I mean, obviously the grains are what we kind of focus on here a little more, but just commodities in general. Natural gas, sugar, cotton, obviously cattle, and then obviously the grain complex, and there's other ones out there. Had a heck of a run in this month of September. Now we're getting close to the end of September. Kind of felt like today maybe that energy was starting to wane or fall apart a little bit. You saw natural gas kind of roll over. You saw that sugar contract kind of roll over, and then same thing here in the grains today. We had a really good start, and then things kind of finished in the negative. So we'll have to see how the next couple of days go. Obviously, we got Friday tomorrow, and then the end of the month on Monday with that quarterly grain stocks. We'll have to just see if this market's, had a good run for a month, and now we're kind of slipping, or is it just a speed bump on the way to move higher?
What is the number of harvest progress in the Midwest?
Well, last week corn was about 14% complete. I think bean was a little bit higher up than that in that regard. A little more moisture came through, so I'm not sure how much progress was done, but obviously some progress will kind of keep moving along here. And that's going to be something I think that may come into as a factor in October, is going to be the pace of harvest and those extra bushels coming in and hitting the the cash markets in that regard. So, everything I'm hearing on the yield side right now, at least from the majority of people, obviously there's some areas that aren't doing as well because of the wetness they dealt with, or even the later season dryness. And I respect those areas, but at least at this time frame, sounds like this bean crop is looking pretty doggone good, one well above averages. Makes me wonder if that USDA number in October might go a little bit higher for beans, and corn continues to impress from what I've been hearing, and that very well may be the case on the October report, that corn crop, can get a little bit bigger. We always have the old saying, big crops get bigger, and it could be pointing that way this year. So we'll have to watch that, very, very closely.
John, could you explain to our listeners about the corn acreage numbers on the report on Monday?
Yeah, we'll get those final planted numbers on Monday. Not expecting a whole lot of changes there. I think the biggest changes and adjustments were made in August, when we've really factored in the prevent plan and the wetness acres that were lost and things there. Now, we could still see some movement maybe on the harvested acre side, harvested for grain. Here in Wisconsin, we're corn silage country for the dairy industry, and obviously that area that has been affected by wetness, so we're seeing a lot more acres going to silage. But on the big picture, that's pretty minimal when it comes to the total acre pile. So, but there's always still some room for a little bit of wiggle. But I'm not expecting a whole lot there. I think the biggest side will come into the grain stock side. That'll be the focus of the marketplace. We expect corn and soybean supplies to be about 30% over last year, which is understandable given the harvest. But this is also still that report. They can go back to January and make some adjustments on the final production. So I'm a little cautious. Something could always happen there that can kind of throw this thing off. Otherwise, grain stocks, we kind of know, the bean numbers, that's exports, it's crush. So we know those numbers. Corn, the only wiggle room is really the feed impact, so we kind of have an idea where we're going to be. And that could be a bit of a trendsetter, though, if those numbers do have some sort of surprise in them.
Did you hear about Brazil's agricultural for right now with their planting season for right now? How about the beans in China from this year's end?
Soybean sales have been pretty doggone good lately, and that's been some of the reason we've seen some good strength here. But I'm very cautious right now, so I'm just going to kind of watch how this plays out over the next couple of weeks. This price rally is not exactly what we need in order to keep exports moving, but at the same time, we'll have to just see how the pace goes. We sell a lot of beans, deliver a lot of them in this October-November window, and that pretty much sets us for the marketing year. So this is a big couple of months here in terms of these bean sales, bean shipments. They've improved. They're still at multi-year lows in terms of total sales, so that is concerning. Keep an eye on the geopolitical side of things. First off, market got a good pop to start today on the Chinese stimulus package. That faded out as the market went on today. We do have this tariff situation with China going in place tomorrow on the 27th. Does China retaliate? Don't be shocked that they bought enough beans that they could possibly do something like that now. Those are some things that are out there. Plus, just in general, if China's stimulating their economy, that means things are pretty rough there in terms of the economic side. These aid packages, or these packages that are putting money into the system, they just are there to put a band-aid on maybe the bigger problem. And obviously, if China's economy struggles, the global economy is going to struggle, as the world's largest importer and user of commodities, has a hard time maintaining its, a buying strength.
Do you have any final thoughts or recap?
This rally we've had in soybeans and in corn, but not so much in corn, but really in soybeans, to me, I think has been a gift for producers. You're looking at a pre-harvest rally that's put some value back into that soybean market. I know I've had a lot of producers had the opportunity to sell $10 cash beans again here this fall, and they took advantage of that and got those beans moved, especially beans you got to move off the combine. There's still a lot of supply coming. It's still early in that South American growing season. If things straighten out, demand slows down, the global supply of beans is going to be very excessive compared to the amount of usage that's out there. So it makes me very antsy for the soybean market. I do think this was a great opportunity to get some things locked in for this year and as well as next year. You know, if you were on it this morning, we had $11 beans at 11.01 for November of 25 this morning. And with the potential crop supplies that we're looking at out there, that these might be great starting places. But again, I hope producers are taking advantage of this. If you don't want to make the sale, puts are cheap to get us through the harvest window. Take advantage of those opportunities here and protect some of these gains and reward this rally somehow.
Where people can find you for your consulting services in Wisconsin?
Sure. Give me a call, 800-334-9779. Shoot me an email at johnh at. And again, don't forget that website of ours, Total Farm, screwed that up. Excuse me. TotalFarmMarketing.com.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, sir. Have yourself a great day and go Packers.
This is John Heinberg from Total Farm Marketing for today's show on Back Roads of Illinois. This is close bell numbers of the commodity markets from Kyle Bumstead from Allendale, Inc. November feeder cattle plus dollar, 925 closing at $244.975. December live cattle plus dollar, 500 closing at $184.825. December lean hogs dash dollar, 975 closing at $73.925. December corn -2 single quote 0 closing at $4.13 single quote 2. November soybeans -5 single quote 0 closing at $10.41 single quote 0. December Chicago wheat +11 single quote 2 closing at $5.89 single quote 2. December KC wheat -2 single quote 0 closing at $5.79 single quote 0. Closing quotes provided by Kyle R. Bumstead Branch Office Manager Erickson, Nebraska, Allendale, Inc. Thanks to our friends from Allendale for bringing the final numbers of trade. Yes, on today's program. We're running out of time on our show, but you can listen to our show on YouTube. And whenever you get your podcast, The Spin Back Roads of Illinois, I am Cesar Delgado. Have a good day.